battle of the budget. The Florida House and Senate are halfway through their annual session and $4 billion apart on a budget.
Battle of the big ones. Lawmakers are at odds on expanding Medicaid, prison reform, gay adoption, and more.
And battle of the leaps. Indiana and Arkansas stoke a political firestorm with laws that critics say let people use religious beliefs to deny services to gay people.
And we have a lot to talk about this morning. Good morning. Happy holidays to all.
It has been a very big week in the news in South Florida, Tallahassee, and abroad as well. In Switzerland, negotiators from the U.S., 5 of its allies, and Iran reached agreement on a framework to limit Iran's nuclear program. But the deal was met with skepticism by many in Congress, by Israel's prime minister, and by Israel's consul general in Miami.
This is a very dangerous agreement, not just for Israel, but for the entire region.
Also making headlines this week, the governors of Indiana and Arkansas, who wrestled with but eventually did sign bills that would let people and companies use their religious beliefs as a reason to deny services to same-sex couples.
In Tallahassee, lawmakers advanced a bill that would let private or religious adoption agencies not place a foster child with a same-sex couple. State Representative David Richardson of Miami Beach, whom you see here, opposes that bill. He is the one responsible for removing the state statute that prohibited gay adoption, which remained on the books even after it had been declared unconstitutional.
Howard Simon is the executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida, which played a key role in getting bans on same-sex adoptions and same-sex marriage overturned.
And Robert Gallagher is a professor of sociology at Broward College and the advisor to that campus's Gay-Straight Alliance. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you come
Thanks
in.
for being here on
And
Monday.
happy Easter, happy Passover, whatever you are celebrating. Howard Simon, let me begin with you. The governors of Arkansas and Indiana, Mike Pence and Asa Hutchinson, both say our bills, our religious restoration bills, have nothing to do with discrimination. This is just about protecting the religious rights of people who may not want to provide services, but they may not discriminate in doing so.
Well, I think we need to find that balance. How do we protect and respect people's religious freedom? Everybody wants to do that. Our Constitution requires that. But we also want to prevent discrimination. I have to say, one of the things that's going on here is that I don't think that people are being honest. And really what is at stake is that what the proponents of these kinds of bills are looking for are an exemption from civil rights laws. They don't like the word discrimination. They don't want to be accused of discriminating. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be discriminating. But really what they want is the religious-based right to discriminate by denying social services.
That's such an interesting way of putting it, because wouldn't a person in that position consider their own religious decision a civil right?
Well, but these battles have started as battles between government and individuals. I mean, remember the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that got approved by Congress in the federal level in the 1993 yeah. Was really about the criminal law of some community imposing a restriction on Native Americans who were not able to use peyote in their religion. It was about the conflict between government and individuals. It was never about my religious right to discriminate against you. Mm-hmm. And that's what this is really all about.
David Richardson, how do you see this dispute playing out? And especially in Tallahassee, there is this bill that is advancing in the House that would allow these private adoption agencies not to place foster children with same-sex couples. It's all part of the same fight, in a sense.
It really is. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I filed an amendment to strip out the homosexual ban that was overturned by the courts. Right. However, I have been told by people privately that there was still some subtle discrimination going on in the state of Florida. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so not only did I want the language out of law, but it's symbolic for our movement to have the words removed. So clearly, this new bill that was filed a week later is in response to my move to successfully remove that language.
Well, did you sort of wave a red flag in front of some of the social conservatives in the legislature by stripping out the old bill, which was unconstitutional? You just could have left it alone and maybe not disturbed them.
Well, it's true. I mean, we can always stay quiet, but social change never occurs through silence, and so we have to have this conversation. The fact that we're here today talking about it promotes and extends the conversation and allows us to have this debate. So, the bill that was filed after my amendment was clearly in response to this, even though they won't say that. But on the floor, when they debated my amendment, they talked about the fact that there would be an option. The majority party offered their members another bill and said that we're going to look at it to try to quiet them, to try to get them under control. But the fact that I got the votes to strip this language out is really historic, because we don't control the floor.
You were going to say.
And I think you're right in that history has a chance of repeating itself here. 59% of people now support same-sex marriage, and that we've had this conversation before. Just 50 years ago, we were having this conversation with African Americans at the lunch counter. Do we have a right to serve them? Do we have not the right to serve them? Women in the workplace, and after World War II, should they go back to the home or be able to work? In the 1970s, Anita Bryant. We all know that story in South Florida, where as gay rights and civil rights for minority groups tend to increase, or we create laws that will help facilitate those civil rights, we tend to see that backlash. And I guess what we're seeing now is that backlash, as Florida just allowed gay marriage a couple months ago. And so I guess my question is what's occurring with this backlash? Why do we see this backlash? And is this the last vestige of rights against LGBT people? How are we doing? What are we doing with that?
There's no such thing as a last vestige to a backlash.
Right.
I'm afraid.
Can we go back to the Religious Freedom Act for a moment? Howard, the Hobby Lobby case that the Supreme Court very narrowly allowed to go through, where this business is allowed to not offer contraceptives under its own religious beliefs to people with the Affordable Care Act. How is that even different from something like this?
This is significantly different. First of all, what you're dealing with here is government money. These are private adoption agencies that are contracting with the government, with state government in Florida, that receive government money, who now want to do with government money what the state government is not permitted to do. It's also important, Glenn, if I could say, this is really not only a discussion about gay rights, because the law here, David will know, talks about gay rights.
Yes.
It talks about the right of any private agency to discriminate against anybody based on their written moral and religious beliefs. It could be somebody who is single, could be somebody of a different religion, could be somebody who doesn't go to church. What it does do is sacrifice the best interest of children for the sake of the private agencies' religious or moral principles.
Representative Richardson, this bill is coming to a vote on the House floor. It's moved very quickly through committees.
Very quickly.
And I would say, given the makeup of the Florida House and its political tenor, probably going to pass. But what will happen if it gets to the Senate? Will the Senate...
the bill will be on the floor for questions on Wednesday and on the floor on Thursday for a vote. And I expect it'll pass, and it'll be hanging there. I believe strategically, we sent our adoption bill to the Senate about 2 weeks ago, and it's sitting over there now. They're going to vote in the Senate on that bill on Wednesday or Thursday. I'm hoping that they will take that bill as it's been presented to them and not put any amendments on it, which would then pull it back to the House. If it comes back to the House, I would expect that they would take this language off this bill and put it on as an amendment and send it back to the Senate.
Yeah, bottom line here, for people who don't know the ins and outs, and I don't claim to know the ins and outs of the legislative process, but the House is going to pass this bill. The question is really whether the Senate is going to move forward. And over in the Senate, it's more collegial, it's different, the tone is different, and the leadership, frankly, is a little bit more I don't know, Howard, progressive, would that be a good word?
Rational.
Rational, okay.
Well, I think that the bill, I think if the adoption bill comes back to the House, I would expect them to use this language as an amendment and then send it back to the Senate, in which case the Senate could kill the entire adoption bill.
Yeah.
Or if it doesn't come back to the House, then even though this latest bill has passed, they'll send it to the Senate, but I would not expect for the Senate to even take it up.
But I would rather see it killed, because this is worse than what we ever had.
Slippery slope?
This is so far. The notion that a private agency operating with a government contract, for example, could deny a placement in a home, say it's a special needs child, placement in a home because the person in that home is of a different religion, or maybe gay, or doesn't go to church, or something like that.
Gives them wide latitude to make this choice.
This is much worse than status quo.
I think to Howard's point, that's really, really important, is the language that says a private placement. But you see, in the state of Florida, we, the government, have outsourced this service. So this is government money that is being first given to a community-based care organization, and then that organization in turn does subcontracts to other 6 here in Miami-Dade County. So, but this is government money, and I really believe, I'm not a lawyer, Howard's the lawyer here, but I really believe this violates Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution.
Which prohibits any
of course.
Support for religious...
We're forgetting the human element. We're forgetting the human element of this too. These are children that have been abused and neglected, have been traumatized, and now we're telling these children that if a group of people want to take you into your home, adopt you, and make your life better, that they're going to deny that service to you, and you could have been in that home for years. So I think we got to think about the human element as well too.
We'll talk more about that. Let's take a quick break, and we have a lot more to talk about when we come right back. Stay with us.
On this Sunday morning, live in our studio, we are talking about the Religious Freedom Acts in Indiana, Arkansas, and Florida, and gay adoption. And before we go further, I should point out that I certainly invited, half a dozen Republican lawmakers, senators, representatives to come and appear on this program and another point of view. So if you were sitting at home saying, boy, everybody's singing from the same hymnal there, all I can say is we tried our hardest to try to get a variety of points of view, and we didn't succeed, so I apologize for that.
Easter Sunday is a tough thing.
Easter Sunday is hard.
However, that does not preclude us from being a very fair and balanced panel, and of course Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, who are making presumed runs toward the presidency, both weighed in on RFRA, and on Fox News this week, Marco Rubio said this.
I don't think Americans want to discriminate against anyone. I think the fundamental question in some of these laws is, should someone be discriminated against because of their religious views? So no one here is saying that it should be legal to deny someone service at a restaurant or at a hotel because of their sexual orientation.
So that brings up when government money is not involved, when we're talking about a business, a private business, is that discrimination?
But didn't we had this argument 50 years ago with African Americans at the lunch counter? That was a private business, and many people, especially in the South, used that argument. It's my religious views that I should not allow African Americans into my restaurant or serve African Americans. So we're almost having the same argument over again. It just happened to be maybe of a different group of people.
Yeah. Well, the law, and Lord knows I'm no expert on these RFRAs, but Howard Simon, the difference with the Indiana law subsequent to the Hobby Lobby Supreme Court decision is the 1993 federal law dealt with government acting.
Right.
What the Indiana legislature did was say private parties.
Exactly.
And explain why that's important.
Senator Rubio can't have it both ways. He says nobody wants to discriminate, but religious freedom should be respected. This is a claimed religious right to be exempt from civil rights laws and essentially deny public accommodations to people who are objectionable to the people who own the places of public accommodations. We're talking about, contrary to what Senator Rubio says, we are talking about restaurants and hotels, and we are talking about the baker who bakes cakes
or the wedding singer,
or a wedding singer, or a venue that rents places for. That is what we're talking about. We are talking about, should there be a religious exemption from the 1964 Civil Rights Act that bars discrimination in places of public accommodation?
You know, what you're starting to see now is the market is kind
of
taking
without government money, as you were saying, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right. No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That was the key point. The key point is that there is no government money here. It is, I mean, what happened to religion? That religion has morphed into essentially my right to discriminate against you, where this whole issue started as the right to be free from government interference with my ability to express my religion.
Okay, so what does it mean? The law says it has to have a substantial burden for the religious freedom if it's a compelling interest. I mean, what does that mean?
No law can substantially burden a religious right. Religious right is one of the freedom of religion, freedom of speech are the two major, maybe most fundamental rights in America. Government cannot impose a substantial burden on your right, unless it has a compelling state interest to do so. And in 1964, when we passed the Civil Rights Act, we said in this country we have a compelling state interest to eradicate discrimination. This would permit discrimination.
All right, well, let me, if I can, I want to jump in with the opposing point of view. The Wall Street Journal this weekend, they publish a terrific weekend edition. They said this, and let's put this quote up on. They said, the Federal and State Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, or RFRAs, very rarely implicate gay rights, and most of these religious cases are non-controversial. They simply say the government must use the least restrictive means of achieving a compelling state interest when infringing on religious practice. And what the headline of that editorial was liberal intolerance. And, I mean, they're accusing essentially you and the ACLU and Representative Richardson, you as well. Don't you know you well enough to include you in that, Rob Gallagher? But, you know, they're saying that you're liberals and you're just intolerant of people with strong religious beliefs.
You know, I think that it's one situation where you have someone making a private decision in the privacy of their home. If you don't like me and you don't want to invite me to dinner at your home, you have that right. But when we're talking about public accommodations, and you know, most people in the state of Florida don't realize, they don't believe it, that you can be denied services just simply for being gay, that you can be denied a hotel room, that you can be fired from
as an openly gay man, I mean, have you had that experience in Florida where somebody has said, I don't want to have your party here, I don't want to...
Fortunately, in South Florida, I have not experienced that, but at an earlier time in my life, I have experienced it, where a partner and I were not welcome in a restaurant, you know? So it happens, not in South Florida, thankfully.
And what you're seeing with the RFRA is that there is a component where the market is taking care of that. There was a boycott against, threatened against Indiana, which I think is why they went back to put amendments on to sort of soften up in the first place.
And I think within the Republican Party, they have really a war amongst themselves between the economic class. You're talking businesses like Walmart. You're talking even NCAA, NASCAR, other organizations saying this law is wrong. Then you've got the social conservatives on the other hand saying, we want this law. So this is really a fight amongst themselves. And in 2016, I think this is going to be a really big issue that the Republicans have to come to terms with on what they decide to do.
Can I step back and look at the big picture for a second? We made a decision in this country with the passage of the 64 Civil Rights Act that we were not going to have such things as, for example, signs in restaurant windows that say, you know, whites only. And this effort to twist and bend these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts to give a religious-based right to discriminate, really what they involve would be signs in restaurants' windows that basically say heterosexuals only.
But after, Howard, after the furor over the Indiana, the first version of the bill, which Governor Pence defended, in fact, we've got some sound from Governor Pence. Can we cue that up and run that sound from Governor Pence of Indiana? All right, hold on just a minute. We're going to get to it. Okay, here we go.
It would be helpful to move legislation this week that makes it clear that this law does not give businesses a right to deny services to anyone.
Should it be legal in the state of Indiana to discriminate against gays and lesbians? What do you say now?
I don't support discrimination against gays or lesbians or anyone else.
So no.
No.
All right.
But how do you differentiate the law from discrimination? How is that different? Or is it your point of view?
Well, I think we have people that want to have it both ways. They want to say they don't want to discriminate, but yet they want to create these laws that give an out for somebody. So that's what's really going on.
All right, if you're open to the public, you're open to the public, not a particular public that you want to be open to.
All right. If anybody at home is wondering, by the way, since 1998, Florida has had a Religious Freedom Act on the books. Parallels, generally, my understanding, the federal law. So there hasn't been much of a flap here, but we've got this gay adoption issue. We will follow that. Representative Richardson?
What's next for that?
Well, we're going to wait. We're going to have a vote Wednesday, Thursday, and then I expect it'll pass in the House, and we'll see if the adoption bill comes back to the House. If it does, I expect this to be amended on that and sent back to the Senate. I'm really hoping I can keep that adoption bill in the Senate and get it passed out the way we sent it to them.
And I can't tell you how much I hope he's successful in doing that, because we spent 15 years in 5 different lawsuits that finally struck down the ban on gay adoption. And God, I don't want this to end up in the courts, but if it passes the Senate, that's where we're going.
It's going back to the courts.
And Florida was one of the last states to end adoption bans. So again, I want to bring it back to the human element. What is it saying about the children that are lingering in the foster care system when we have a group of people that are willing to adopt them? So why would we deny that child a permanent residency when that child could have a permanent residency? Sometimes with a family has been with a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and that's the only family he or she even knows.
We will be watching that.
We will, and that's going to be the final word, and a good one is that. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in. When we come back, a veteran